American citizens in high school don't know what Project Northwoods. You don't go to history class and your teacher goes up and goes, by the way, there was this event that was going to be planned during JFK's administration where they were going to do a similar 9/11 type of attack but blame Cuba and Russia as the enemy. You never hear about that. You have to be one of these aware people, truth seeker, and start digging for that yourself. With the Northwood documents, the fact that the Northwood documents said specifically that they wanted civilian aircraft to fly into buildings and they were going to blow up boats that they knew that college students would be on spring break enjoying their time, and they would come up with this death toll. See, what they always want is a death toll. The first time that they do something, if they don't get the death toll that they want and they don't get the shock and awe in the mass media, it's a failure because it's not large enough for us to wage war against another country. But if they can get these horrible images on television and put enough fear into our hearts and minds that 3,000 or more people perished all at the same time because of this enemy, it's reason enough for us to want to pick up our guns and blindly, as a mindless groupthink, go fight against this enemy that just caused our nation that much pain and anguish. And whenever you look at a situation as an awakened person, you have to think to yourself, who is to gain from this situation? Is it us as citizens? Are we going to live more free and have the ability to think for ourselves? Or are we going to be like, well, if you question this event, are you going to be targeted as, quote-unquote, a domestic terrorist? Now, 9/11 was a strategically planned military event that they wanted to use to get things like the Patriot Act passed. So basically, if they think that you're a person that disagrees with any official version of that story, they can monitor your cell phone calls, your text messages, your emails, and pretty much label you and put you on a list as a person that is just as equally as a threat to them as the enemy itself. Pretty much what the Patriot Act does is it takes the Constitution and it wads it up into a piece of garbage and throws it into the trash and takes away all of your constitutional rights. Because the Patriot Act is pretty much labeling everybody that disagrees with the events or the story of that event that day and making you the enemy. So the Constitution only protects people that are citizens. When you're considered a domestic terrorist, they take away your rights and they strip you of your citizenship. And then the Patriot Act comes into place and you are now a terrorist and you are actually part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. So you're no longer really considered an American citizen anymore once you're considered the enemy. So the Constitution only protects the citizens. So if you go against the official story that they're telling you, you're no longer a citizen. You're no longer a patriot. And you're considered part of the problem. So, I mean, if you think to yourself, I believe that it was a planned detonation. I believe that they were drone aircraft that were flown into this. I don't believe that that jet fuel has the ability to knock down towers, that they fell in a free-form fall, and that there was liquid, hot, melted steel underneath the building because of explosive detonations that went off before those airplanes hit. And that there was another building that fell, that covered up all their tracks, where all the information about the planning of that event happened, then that building was magically pulled. Now, to go into other versions of the story, the same thing happened in Pearl Harbor, and the same thing happened in Oklahoma City. Everybody that sees these events on TV thinks to themselves, well, there has to be an enemy. In Pearl Harbor, the enemy was Operation Z with the Japanese. They were going to come over here and make a statement. Well, the real enemy was America wanted to be involved in World War II, and we needed an event like that to push us into the war. As a truth seeker, I realized that thousands of people did die that day, but for what reason did those people die for? What reason are we sending our sons and maybe even daughters over to the Middle East to fight because of this event that created this war? False flag operations are done to inflict the government's agenda onto people. It's to control the economy, it's to control war, it's to even send America into war. The first false flag operation that sent our current generation into war was Pearl Harbor. The second one that led up to Desert Storm was the Oklahoma City bombings. And the third one was the first attack on the World Trade Center, which happened during George Herbert Walker Bush's administration, where an Egyptian terrorist was offered $1 million by the FBI to put a bomb on one of the columns of one of the towers and bring it down. It did not get the death toll. False flag operations have to have a large death toll. It has to pull on people's heartstrings. It has to get people afraid so that they're willing to pick up their guns. They're willing to go fight for the cause. kind of like when Hitler burnt down the Reichstag. He blamed it on the Communist Party when in fact he was a communist himself, and he was the one that planned it himself. Putting into the people's minds a version of who the enemy is, creating in the people's minds their version of what's really going on, when in actuality it's not true at all. After the events happen, there's usually a consequence or an immediate action that happens right afterwards to quote-unquote prevent it from happening again. So when the Reichstag happened, Hitler comes up with a decree, blames it on the Communist Party, and then he comes in and takes over the whole entire country, blames it on the Communist Party, gives them a false sense of a utopia, which allows him to take over the country. Let's carry that over to America. After 9/11 happened, the Patriot Act comes out. So they're blaming the fact that we didn't have enough surveillance on these people. We didn't have enough know-how of where they were being trained, their cell phone calls, their emails. We could have monitored and controlled people a little bit more to prevent this event from happening. So they come up with a Patriot Act that allows them to start monitoring people longer, reading their emails, cell phone calls, text messages, and things like that to quote-unquote prevent it from happening again, when in actuality they're the ones that did it themselves to pass that act. I think that it's so important to get the information out because there's so many people out there that are hungry. They know that something is wrong. They feel in their spirit like they're being lied to. Like if you go to a person on the street and ask them, hey, do you think that the government lies to you? Sure I do. Yeah, they lie to you all the time. They lie to you about why they're taxing you. They lie to you about what's going on in the war in Afghanistan. They lie to you about this, NASA, this, that, secret things, government conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has the acceptance that yes, there's something going on, but how far do you want to follow the wormhole? So we are force-fed these things, not really realizing what they're doing. See, what sheep do is they follow the butt of the sheep right in front of them. The shepherd never sharpens his knife in front of the herd. So he's up there going, man, we're going to have some lamb chops tonight. I'm going to have a new wool coat for my wife and everything like that. And all the sheep that's doing is just following the butt of the other one in front of it. I mean, he can just take him and dump him right off of a cliff for all he knows. We want to be free. Now, freedom doesn't necessarily mean that we are a billionaire and we have the ability to get onto our Learjet and travel across the world and eat French bread in France today. Freedom is awareness. Freedom is not being a slave to this stuff anymore. Slavery is happening in secret. These people don't even realize that they're slaves, and they don't even realize that time is running out.
You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.